The gentleman from California, Mr. Vargas, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Ranking Member. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. Now, this is a little odd for me because normally the way it works is when the Democrats are in charge, we've got the first 4 that testify basically saying what we believe, and then you got the Republican at the end basically saying what they believe. But since the Republicans are in charge now, normally you would have the first 4, basically stating the facts as the Republicans would believe, and then we'd have the Democrat at the end basically saying what we believe. However, I found very little to disagree with what was said with most of what everybody said. I mean, there were some discrepancies, and I do want to probe them a little bit, and I would state at the outset that I do believe in disclosures, and I especially believe that ESG disclosures are material. I do like where Gensler's going on that. I'll set that aside because that's one thing we just like to fight about up here. But Mr. Trotter, you said something that was very interesting. You said that you have these basic 4 facts or 4 issues that are important. Number 2, you said balanced approach to scale regulatory burden to the size of the company. I think that's what you said. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
That's correct. I did say that.
Okay. And I think that what Commissioner Lubin, I think what you said is, well, this is kind of taking us down the deregulatory path where we shouldn't go.
I did say that.
But there seems to be some logic in what Mr. Trotter said. It would seem to me that as the company is small, you wouldn't have to necessarily load it up with all of the burdens that you'd want to load up on a larger company. For example, we do that with the banks. Obviously, if a bank is significant and it's going to have systemic issues, we want to do stress tests that are very important to make sure that we don't have massive failures. But if it's a community bank, we don't require all of that. We allow them to exist, but we don't require all those regulations. I mean, there seems to be some logic to that. What do you think?
I think the issue here, and there are a lot of issues that we're trying to tackle, and a lot of these issues become conflated. So we've got very small businesses on the one hand that we're trying to take care of, the mom and pops, the pizza shops, the beauty salons, and things like that. And those are very small businesses that are taken care of very adequately under provisions that we all have in our statutes. And there are some bills here that we don't like that are going to give them a totally,
right, but let's move forward. It's the ones that are ready to go up for the IPO.
Right, the bigger businesses, there are some really big businesses right now, really large companies that are sitting in this space where they don't have to go public because they're so comfortable in the private market where they really ought to be public companies. And they're the companies that everybody's lamenting. We don't have enough IPOs, we don't have big companies, and there isn't disclosure in the market. There isn't the information, right. There aren't rules about the auditors, there aren't rules about third-party.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second because I think you're taking it in a different direction than I was asking. I'm talking about companies that want to go to the IPO and want to be in the public side. That's what I'm asking about. Obviously, there's large, private companies that I think would benefit from going to IPO, but they don't because they're comfortable because they have the backing that they need. Mr. Trotter, why don't you comment on this? I mean, it seems to me that it would make some sense for the smaller companies that want to go into this IPO.
Absolutely, and I'll start with a comment that I've heard Ranking Member Sherman make in the past, which is you can't give 404B relief. You can't give relief from the Sarbanes-Oxley internal controls audit requirement because then you're going to have more WorldComs and Enrons. WorldCom and Enron were mega cap companies. WorldCom had $30 billion in revenue. Enron had reported $100 billion in revenue, $10 billion in revenue 4 years before it melted down, right? So they would never have qualified as an emerging growth company. And this is exactly the point. So they would be, if you had a time machine and the Jobs Act existed prior and Sarbanes-Oxley existed previously, they would have been, as mega cap companies, they would have to comply with the full panoply of regulation, exactly as you're describing, and a startup that is trying to enter public company status gets relief. And it's based on the original SEC rule says when you initially go public, even if you are a mega cap on day one, you get until your second annual report before you have to comply with 404B, even for the largest company. So the idea of the IPO on-ramp was, let's extend that. We did it for 5 years. It's time to extend it more.
My time is up, and I apologize because I have more questions, but thank you, and I yield.